I played bishop e3, loved following my steps, and then queen f6 was played by my opponent, Evgeny Romanov. Now, before the game, I was trying to come up with something because, as we know, c3 is the main line. In fact, we saw it in the game between Ludwig and Log yesterday. But I decided to play this very strange knight d6. Now, I don't remember the origins of how I came up with it exactly. I think I just randomly was sitting at the board, playing on which board back before the computers, and I thought that after bishop takes pawn takes black. I think the line that I think I looked up the computers like queen takes b2 is winning for black. Now, again, I will turn it on to what the computer says. Computers nowadays they're so good that I think it'll show that was queen d4 knight d4. I don't remember which one was supposed to be good, but I remember looking at this computer right away. So queen takes b2 is very good. Now again, I don't remember exactly what the preparation was, but I know that we had worked out something that we thought was playable. I don't know if it was queen d4. I don't know if it was knight d4 or bishop c4. What exactly it was. I suspect this is what it was because already, I mean, maybe d5 is good. There was something along these lines. But anyway. And it was very complicated. The computer immediately when I plugged it in spit out queen takes b2. I was like, black is winning. Then we went deeper into many of the variations, and it said black is not winning. So anyway, the thing is, but what happens if black takes the pawn? You got this very ugly double stack pawn to the center of the board that's very isolated and weak. But what ended up happening was I remember I was thinking, well, what about just queen d4? You know, if black trades, you undouble your pawns, you got the knight passing the queen out of the board. And so this was one of the lines that I thought was reasonable. But one of the main reasons I played this, besides the fact that queen takes b2 didn't work, was that there's very few other uses of e4. And knight e7 is playable for black here. Obviously, in this case, with both players having double stacked pawns, it's not really clear cut. But the thing is, black can also go queen g6 to size up. There's a really beautiful win here with queen g6, knight c3, knight e7, castles, and now in black castles, there's this unbelievable shot, queen to d8 here. And if it, I guess actually now that I look at it with the computer says it's not winning by fours. Oh, it seems off a little bit. Sorry. Apologies, you guys. I think you can see it, but I'll change the board for a second. So anyway, basically, the thing is there's 95 blacks. Okay, but what's crazy about the position is black takes, it's a potential ice here. You get checkmated, king has no squares to come up to. And if black moves the bishop, for example, to g4, you would take the knight. Now, if he takes, I think you take with the knight or king. You have a knight and a bishop for a rook. Now, long term, this should be winning from the knight and bishop against the one rook. But also, if black then tries to guard the knight, like let's just say queen f6, you can just sack the queen. And after king takes, you go rook d8. And it's a really beautiful checkmate. Again, it's an ice skater. King has no squares to come up, and it's game over, right? So this was another reason I played it. So anyway, you know, in the game Romanov, he ends up playing pawn takes knight. I played queen d4. I believe he played bishop to d7, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, I think he played. Did he play queen g6 or bishop d7 first? I think he played queen g6 first. Now I might have the order wrong. Let me see. What did he play? No, he did play queen g6. Okay, so he played queen.
Message even.
Oh, stop! Too many ads. Thank goodness. That was too many apps.
Too many work apps giving you nightmares? Rest easy with Click.
Vincent Knopf Kingpin is one of the most fearsome, bleak, and hard-nosed renditions of a villain to ever appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's cold, calculating, and unlike many villains in the MCU, decidedly well-defined.
It's funny, isn't it? How even the best of men can be deceived by their true nature.
However, it's highly unlikely that D'Onofrio's Fisk will be featured anytime soon on the silver screen. And the reason why? Well, it has next to nothing to do with him. Like so many things in life, it's politics. But before we get into that, let's back up. Most people think of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, as being a daredevil villain. He's one of the quintessential rogues for battling Jack Murdoch's little boy. His iconic bald head and stout stature, his ascot and patented white jacket. He's appeared in animation, comics, and trading cards. He's the Joker to Daredevil's Batman. However, he's really a Spider-Man villain. This complex and brooding antagonist first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man issue 50 from July of 1967. Drawn by John Romita Sr. and written by Stan Lee, this incarnation of the Rotund Overlord portrayed him as more of a standard criminal mastermind. Ostensibly, he was a villain of the week. However, when a young artist named Frank Miller took the character to the pages of Daredevil, he breathed a new morally gray, emotional backstory into Fisk and permanently cemented him into the reader's minds as the quintessential rival of the blind lawyer of Hell's Kitchen. Vincent D'Onofrio's portrayal of Fisk isn't only pitch perfect, but it builds on what was established in the comics. His hulking physique, his emotional center, and the raw power are all on display thanks to D'Onofrio. His Fisk also has a tender side, adapted from Miller and Sienkiewicz's Love and War graphic novel. He has a rage and an intensity that is portrayed perfectly. During the 1990s, the comic book industry changed forever. And, by proxy, the film industry did as well. Basically, two ideas collided to permanently alter the face of the comic book industry forever. Number one, speculators. And number two, distribution. A rash of underinformed, overzealous speculator buyers flooded the market, buying up sometimes hundreds of copies of newly published comics in the hopes of storing them away for a few years and then selling them for thousands of dollars. Spurred on by an erroneous local news broadcast that touted the high-priced sales of books like Amazing Fantasy 15, Action Comics 1, and Detective 27, people genuinely thought that they were going to get rich buying hundreds of copies of Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, and The Death of Superman. These books had print runs of millions, and everyone was saving them. The reason older comics were worth so much money is because there's a high demand and a low supply. Because in the 1950s, there were mass comic book burnings and censorship boards discouraging people from keeping their, at the time, highly disposable medium. During the 90s, everyone was keeping their precious copies of Youngblood Strike File. This was only half the problem, though. Marvel was making so much money in the first half of the decade that they decided to buy a distribution company, pull all their books from stores, and start a chain of Marvel stores, something akin to the Disney store at your local mall. Needless to say, both of these business practices didn't end up well. Marvel virtually capsized the entire industry overnight. The speculators jumped ship, and the major companies were struggling to keep afloat. Marvel was forced to declare bankruptcy. In a last-ditch effort to remain solvent, they auctioned off the films. Hulk ended up at Universal, X-Men and Fantastic Four at Fox, Spider-Man at Sony, Namor and Daredevil at Columbia, and Iron Man at Paramount. So here's where we get into the weeds. During this time, people appeared within the respective universe of the individual characters were allowed to appear in projects, i.e., the lawyers were able to convince everyone that Wilson Fisk was legally a Daredevil character and wrap the character up for a solid decade and a half. However, as the MCU started to achieve more popularity, Marvel's non-MCU characters slowly began returning to the fold. Daredevil, Ghost Rider, and Blade's film rights slowly reverted back to Marvel, and the House of Ideas, run by Hollywood maestro Kevin Feige, began putting into place plans to bring new projects to the forefront starring these characters, only with one minor twist. They were going to be TV projects. And here's where things get even more dicey. At this time, Marvel was run by Ike Perlmutter, Revco drugstore magnate, Polka owner, and the former owner of Marvel prior to the sale of Disney. Let's put it this way. Ike is a specific type of person. He likes things done his way, and he likes people who are loyal to him. He's purportedly something of a handful behind the scenes, but that's besides the point. Some people are better at dealing with him than others. Mike was excited about the potential for Marvel to push into the TV space. However, he didn't like how much control Kevin Feige had managed to wrangle. He wanted the TV and film universe to talk to each other, but he wanted to exert more control over just how that happened. So, what did he do? He brought a famed comic book scribe, the Commando and Teen Wolf screenwriter Jeff Loeb, to produce everything. The plan was this: they'd basically repeat the playbook. They'd launch a series of live-action TV projects, building an interconnected web of characters, all street-level vigilantes, in order to distinguish themselves from the theatrical wing of the company, and then build up a team adventure, in the same way the films lead up to the Avengers. Wilson Fisk is used in the Daredevil show as the big bad. He's arguably one of like 2 or 3 MCU villains that have actually been done well. Usually the heroes are well-defined and charismatic and have depth. The villains, not so much. The Dark Elf from Thor 2? What even was that dude's name? Justin Hammer? Red Skull, one of the best Marvel Universe villains, isn't really even in the films. What a major misstep. Regardless, the Drew Goddard Netflix Daredevil series created one of the best MCU villains. However, don't expect to see him showing up again anytime soon. The Netflix shows Daredevil, Punisher, Luke Cage, and Jessica Jones all did fairly well, but weren't the cultural touchstones that Marvel wanted. Kevin Feige didn't like being pushed out and disagreed with what Jeff Loeb was doing with the characters, and specifically how he handled the Defenders, the grand finale of the Netflix experiment. In October of 2019, the ship righted itself just slightly. Kevin Feige was granted control of the TV division of Marvel. Disney Plus was getting a big push, and the corporate powers that be didn't want to take any chances. They wanted Disney Plus to be a success, and with a contingent of Marvel shows acting as their anchor for subscriber generation, they needed them to be good. However, this small screen era of the MCU and the previous attempts like Peggy Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and The Defenders aren't on the same level. Feige doesn't seem interested in litigating the past. He wants to move on. He doesn't seem interested in utilizing the greatest villain of MCU history on the big screen, which is evidenced even more so by Wilson Fisk's appearance in Into the Spider-Verse. Marvel has been very specific about attempting to strong-arm their characters as being the only version of the characters the public is aware of. So much so that they forced Fox to reshoot the entire back half of Dark Phoenix because they didn't want the Skrulls in the film. And then, there's that whole Quicksilver thing. Some fans remain convinced that Charlie Cox's Daredevil is going to show up in Sony's Spider-Man No Way Home. However, we'll see. And while the film does exist in the MCU, it's not a fully Marvel Studios film. It's a co-produced project with Sony, so who knows? Let's just leave it at this. If you're a huge Kingpin fan, don't hold your breath to see him going toe-to-toe with the Avengers anytime soon. You'll be holding your breath for a while. And that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this one, press the like button down below. And if you haven't done so, also hit that subscribe button. On screen right now are hopefully 2 or more videos. Click on either of those and hopefully I'll see you for the next video.
What if ideas remained ideas? Buildings would be blueprints, products would be wireframes, cures would be experiments. Project Management Institute will make sure that you have what it takes to make your work and our world stronger. Because the future isn't something you sit around waiting for. The future is the reality you decide to create. Make reality.
So I've got my essay written, and I've been working on it for about a week. So now I'm going to show you how I use Grammarly to edit. Okay, so here's my essay, and I'm going to click through Grammarly suggestions in the right panel. Your sentence may be unclear or hard to follow. Consider rephrasing. That's true. This is much better. I didn't know my writing contained so many run-on sentences until I started using Grammarly. And this paragraph may be too long. Consider starting a new one here. This too long. And that is the perfect spot to break it up. Let's add a comma here.
Down here, how do you get the night into the game?
It just sucks. It's never come in if you don't put up for it. So basically what he's saying was you're a loser.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you browse chess games here on YouTube, you're most likely to discover some of the games of the masters, the best players currently living or throughout history. But in this video, I'm going to show you the dumbest chess game I've ever seen in my life. And hopefully the dumbest chess game you have ever seen in your life that you yourself have not played. Shout out to Daniel Guan who sent this to me. I've got nothing else to say. Let's go back. We are in the year 1983 and we are in Holland. Christoph van der Loo has the white pieces. M. Hessling has the black pieces. I don't know his first name or her first name for that matter. I actually don't know who that is. And this is one of the few games on this channel I'm going to have an eval bar because that's how exciting this was. Pawn to e4, pawn to e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. So far so good in Italian. Nowadays, players play bishop c5, c3, knight f6, d3, and they maneuver. But back then, we got knight to g5. Knight to g5 is known as the fried liver. After knight f6 to go after the f7 pawn. Nowadays, the main line is d5, and after pawn takes, you play knight a5, or knight d4 is a very interesting system. But black was ahead of their time. Black clearly had foreseen that some 38 years later, a Traxler video from one Gotham Chess would hit YouTube, and they were well prepared, and they played the move bishop to c5. Now, the engine hates it, but my engine is on a low depth, that's why it's showing plus 1.6. The Traxler is one of the most insane openings that exists, and the point is that after knight takes f7, which forks the queen and the rook, black has this dynamite strike, the bishop takes f2 check. Now, computers move 25 to 30, so 20 moves beyond this point have proven that white in the Traxler is okay and can get a computer advantage, like 0.7, 0.8. But who has the time to memorize 25 moves and tons of branches of variations? Right? So king takes f2, let me just take the bishop. And now, rather than losing my queen or my rook, defending one of them, I'm going to go knight takes e4, check. This attacks the king and frees up the queen. The king goes to e3. This is one of the moves of the Traxler. The other move is to just tuck the king back here. Now, normally, queen h4 is played in this position with black. The point being that you defend the knight and you threaten queen f4 check. But black plays queen e7, which is not a very popular move because it loses. It's a losing move according to modern day analysis. White should now take the rook, and white can survive this position. But in this game, white played the move c3. And I can only imagine that the plan was to prevent something from coming to d4. Like if queen c5 check, for example, you have this.
Hi there. It's me, John Chess, inventor of chess. And are you sick of sucking at chess? Well, looking for you, I have also invented AIM chess. Look at this chess puzzle. Did you solve it? Of course not. That's because you're not using AIM chess. AIM chess is a digital chess trainer that helps you improve by
And then you have a barrier here, right? And then so you can always like take and hide your king. That was the point. The thing is that the move c3 in the game did not prevent knight d4 at all. But after knight d4, the position is plus 5. It's plus 5. But it's plus 5 if and only if you do not take the rook, you do not take the knight, and you do not take this knight. It is only plus 5 if you play d3. d3. That is the only way. Just wait for a move, and black has no threats. It looks like there are threats after knight f5 check, but you're completely safe in the center of the board, as idiotic as that looks. So, instead, white takes the knight, and oh, here we go back down. Now it's 0.00, queen h4 check, king goes back to e3, and black plays the move d5. Now this looks absolutely terrifying. Look at what the eval bar is going to say. It's saying plus 3, right? But watch this. Watch this. Takes. This is the point. And oh, actually the eval is now back down a little bit. And the computer's going to actually realize that it has the position incorrect. Because the only move that you have is to go to c4. Right? But now, after this move b5 check, actually black is winning. Oh, the computer does not understand the position. unless you add depth to it. You need to boost the computer's rating a little bit for it to understand what's going on. So this king is now being hunted out. And by the way, just for the record, anywhere the knight moved would have been a discovered check. But white is up 6 points of material. So check here. And now the position is completely lost for white. Completely lost. The only way that this is completely lost, though, is if the queen finds a way to get to the king. How's the queen going to do that? By the way, notice that this rook has been hanging since, like, move 5. This knight arrived on move 5, and white's king has been basically hunted to death. And now there is a breathing moment, but there is a winning move here for black, and black spots it, and the move is queen to h4 to bring the queen back to e7, at which point it's essentially checkmate. Like, that is mate. Queen e7 is essentially mate. So, what is the only way to prevent getting checkmated? You can try to pause here and find it. This entire game will basically be a riddle. How do you get out of getting mated? It's actually incredibly difficult to spot this move. So, it has to do with getting your king more access. So you're not going to go here. You can't really go back because then I hunt you down with my a pawn and still mate you with my queen. The move is this: knight takes e5, because now the king attacks the knight. And if I check you, you go here, and you're safe again, and now you're up 10 points of material. Okay, great. So knight takes e5. Now the only move for black to get an advantage in this position once again is to castle long. Long castle. So the rook now pressures the bishop. The queen patrols the entire area over here. And again, white has one and only one move that does not lead to force mate. Every other move is force mate. c4. How does that not lead to force mate? Well, you're trying to get c takes b5 on the board and escape down the c file backwards. That's the only way you're going to escape. Also, you need to defend against rook takes bishop. Rook takes bishop is a massive threat. So, c4. But rook takes bishop still appears. Wait a minute. I thought we just defended against that. C takes d5. Well, black has it back up. So now, white is up 9 points of material, but it's mate in 14 moves by force, if black finds it. White plays the move knight to c3, and now, in this position, there is a winning move for black, which forces checkmate, and white would need to sacrifice all their material. What is that move? What is the move? Because you start looking for this check, that doesn't do anything. That check just takes. Knight e6 is actually very scary looking. You cannot take it, because then the queen teams up with the rook, and after check here, check, anywhere you move, it's mate. So knight e6 is pretty scary, but king takes b5 is on the board, which is why I said this is one of the dumbest games I've ever seen in my life. So knight c3, the only move that wins the game here, or at least forces mate, is a5. That's called a mating net. You are trying to weave a mating net. You take away all the king's escape squares as no move now. And here's the threat. The threat is this. Let's say you go a3. Something like a3. Watch this. Queen f6. But I thought king takes 9. Yeah, queen b6. Look at you getting crisscrossed applesauce in the middle of the board. Okay, so we can't play a3. So what will we play to prevent mate after queen f? Let's take this pawn. Yeah, so after that, the force mate is queen takes knight. It's a force mate where you die very slowly. You don't get checked. I just get closer and closer, and then your king runs out of squares. If you try to run away like this, check, here, knight takes knight is checkmate. Yeah, I mean, when your king is the most advanced piece, and the army behind it is worth 22 points, it's probably bad. You're probably going to lose. So, in the game after knight c3, black did not find the move a5, and instead opted for knight to c6, which, as you can see, goes from m14 to 0, 0, 0 after the move knight c6. And here, white plays one of the most disgusting moves I have ever seen in my life, ever. And I've played a lot of games, and I've watched a lot of games, and I've thought of a lot of chess moves. So here's the thing. If you play king c6, then after queen b4, it's bye-bye, you are banished to the shadow realm because you're just getting mated. If you take with the pawn, then after queen d4, king b5, you're getting banished to the shadow realm once again. And if you take with the horsey, then it's a very swift death. You die with queen c4 mate. It's just mate. So you cannot take the knight, but you can play this move. Now tell me this is not the stupidest move you've ever seen. If you are looking at the position correctly, yes, b takes a4 is a possibility. But after knight takes knight, white's king is not only safe, white maintains a 3-point material advantage, and white is potentially better. The only way for black to do anything is to threaten mate again, and you would play b3. And somehow white just keeps playing the damn game. Keeps playing the damn game. Okay, well, black just doesn't take the queen at all and plays queen e7 check. King takes b5. And now black has to play knight takes knight to threaten bishop d7, among other things. But then there would be check here, and the king would escape. The king would escape. And this position is apparently equal. What is the computer saying? Rook d6? Oh, then queen a5, rook b6. Is it oh no, it's still winning for black. So rook d6, rook b6, and cut the king off on the a file. And that's the way black would win this position. So knight takes e5, yes. Knight takes e5 would have been the only way for black to play on. And finally, black did something dumb themselves. Black played queen takes e5. And now we go from...
No importa lo que tomes para la gripa. Siempre puedes usar Vaporub. Su fórmula 3 en 1 alivia
mate in 14 to equal to -5 to +5. +5. Why? Because of queen c4. And now white is still up 7 points of material, and the king is no longer getting mated because it has a safety net. Knight d4 check, king to a4, bishop d7. All right, great. It's time to bring the king back home. Wait, it's not time to bring the king back home because knight c2. And we might get a repetition of moves, which would be depressing. No repetition of moves. No, the king goes back forward. Not only does the king go back forward, knight c6, the king ain't slowing. Aren't you happy you clicked on this game? It was such a clickbaity title, but isn't this so worth it? This is better than any movie. Anyway, king a6, knight to b8, and if white was a super GM, white would have just repeated moves. But white is not a super GM. So white took on a7, and now it's mate in 5 again. It is mate in 5 again, but it's mate in 5 again in a very, very specific way. I'm mating that once again, queen to d6. Threatening, I'm not even sure what is being threatened. I think what's being threatened here is queen b6 and something moving to c6. So for example, in this position, no, I'm sorry. Right now the threat is mate on b7. Okay, wow. So knight a4, that's the threat. It's queen b, okay. And if queen b3, queen a6. So there's no way to prevent check and mate on b7. And if you play knight a4, then I just take and I threaten. Okay, makes sense. Okay, sounds good. Excellent. Question asked, question answered. c6 played in the game. To try to play queen c7, queen b7. But that move doesn't win. c6 is now advantage for white because queen c7 can be prevented with the absolutely savage move knight b5. And you cannot take because you're pinned. So now black plays bishop f5, looking to get a 7th rank mate somehow. So white just plays d4, rook d7 check, and the king is mated to a8. Oh, yes. Aren't you so happy you clicked? Queen e7, and the simplest of pawn takes pawns. Bishop e4, pinning my pawn to my king I put in the corner voluntarily. d5, breaking the pin, but after bishop takes d5, you are out of options. You have to take. So now you have sacrificed a queen. You are only up 2 points. Knight a7 check. King d8, king takes knight. And now we go from +4 to minus everything. The game is over in 6 moves. mate. Queen b4 check is force mate. King a8, king c7, bishop f4 check, you take, the king's mated. King's mated. But queen c7 check first, and rook a5. Also looks like mate, right? I mean, it's mate. Queen c8 is mate, queen a7 is mate, rook a7 is mate. Check. Check. Rook takes bishop. Check. Can't mate me if I'm checking you. Check. Rook d7.